Welcome to the BuiltOnAir podcast, season 11, episode 8. Myself, Dan Fellers, and Camille with us today. Welcome, Camille.
Hello.
It's just the two of us today. Ali couldn't make it. She'll be back with us next week, and we should have a guest with us next week. We were going to have one today, but wasn't able to make it, so we'll reschedule him for another day. So Camille and I are going to fill the airwaves with you every week. We come with a 1-hour podcast talking about all things Airtable. I'll go through briefly what we're going to be talking about today. We always start off with our Around the Bases, covering everything to keep you up to date on what's going on in the Airtable communities. Then we'll do a quick spotlight on our primary sponsor, OnToAir. Then Camille is going to take over and going to do two different segments. We're going to break them up into the first one talking about the formulas and linked records in our field focus segment in a base that she's built and uses for invoicing and billing. And then she'll go into how to automate the billing aspect using make.com. And then quick shout out to our community and how you can join. And then finally, we're going to do an app highlight on the barcode generator app. So with that, we will start with our Around the Bases. And the first one is a new contest that Airtable just announced last week on the Interface Designer Contest. So Jordan, the manager of the community, has posted that they are giving away money. So it looks like 3 different categories: best design, best use case / solution focus, and a wild card. And so it looks like they're going to have 9 money winners. So for each category, there's a $5,000 first place, a $2,000 second place, and a $1,000 third place, plus swag and an invitation to a special meeting to give feedback. Thoughts, Camille?
Well, I put in my comment that on this thread that the real prize is being at the feedback, hearing, because presumably the people who win prizes for this contest will have used Interface Designer enough to create a good, interface for it. Meaning they probably would have run into a roadblock or two and would have had, I wish I could have done such and such to make this design a little better. And so it's an interesting way of sort of picking out who would have the most sort of fleshed out feedback to give about Interface Designer, which is still technically in beta. They still call it a beta, even though it's more or less fully functional. But there's a lot of things that I think many people want that are missing. So
Yep. Yeah, I liked I'm hoping they respond to this one. If there's any planned new features before the competition time, we'll see if they have anything planned, because it's been a while since they've updated Interface Designer with new features.
the button element is, I think, the newest piece. I don't anticipate them releasing. It'd be weird if they released a new feature during the time of the contest. Can you scroll back up, please, to see when the deadline is?
July 31st.
Okay, so a month and a half essentially to. As much as I want new features, you should probably wait until this contest is over, because it's going to delay people as they figure out how to use it, unless it's very simple.
Small features. Yeah. So this will be cool. Be interesting to see if submissions. Scott posted free money. I kind of agree. I was mentioning before the show, it'll be interesting how many submissions they get. Because like you were mentioning, like there's only so much you can do in Interface Designer. So it'll be interesting how they judge, because I think a lot will look fairly similar. But
I have seen some creative use cases, and I'm not going to reveal other people's secrets in case they want to compete themselves, but I've seen people get fairly creative how to work around some of the limitations of Interface Designer. And we've all seen examples from Chris Dancy, who has very complex Airtable solutions, including nowadays some fairly involved interface designers. So,
Yeah.
interested. I'm sure he'll submit one, or at least he publishes some of his interfaces every now and again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if I were to pick who's to beat, it's probably Chris Dancy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Allie's got some good ones too. She might submit if that's possible. So anyways, yeah, we'll when they announce it, it looks like so July 31st is the deadline. So get your interfaces in by July 31st at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And then they'll announce the winners in August. So we'll definitely check out, keep our eye on that and showcase the winners and the cool interfaces that people submit. So looking forward to that in August. All right, next one. As far as new features, there was a big one. So we have a couple. There's two that I want to highlight. So the big one here is what they're calling Document Automator, and they kind of announced this as like a new app. In the email announcement that I got, they kind of announced it as like this big new app, but it's really just built into automations. And so I don't know if it's worthy of calling it an app, but it is a cool new feature. But it's basically the ability to create a new Google Doc based off of data from your Airtable data, and it's built into automation. So along with all the other tasks, there's now they had Google Forms and Google Sheets tasks before, and now they have Google Docs, and so you can see that in automations. I'll do a quick demo of it, but any input there, Camille?
Questions? Yeah, I'm sure you'll get into in your demo. There's some limitations. It's a nice addition to create a Google Doc from just some simple data if you need a quick export things. And I'll wait till the demo to get into specifics.
Yeah. So good stuff there. There's a couple. I'll be very unbiased in my evaluation of it, but I am biased. I have a product in Ontaire that's similar, more advanced than what can be done here. So I'll just give a quick plug before we do the demo. If you're using this and it's not quite what you need and you need more power, then check out the Ontaire product that also integrates with Google Docs. But yeah, let me do a quick demo of it. Actually over here. So basically you would set up your automation like you would normally. You can trigger it off of a record or at a scheduled time. The cool thing that this one does that we don't yet do, we'll do eventually, but the cool thing is this one, you don't need to trigger it off of a record. So you can actually insert a view, a table, and it doesn't have to be tied to a single record, which I know our product and I think some of the other competitive ones and like Page Designer are kind of triggered off of a single record. So that's kind of cool. But basically you would just set it up. You have to connect to your Google account and then you specify a folder, and then you can insert dynamically the title based off of any fields that you retrieve through a find record or a lookup record. And then your content here, this is what's going to get inserted into your Google Doc. And so you can actually insert grids of like the full view. And another cool thing that it does is if your view has grouping, it will actually insert that same grouping into the Google Doc. So you'll have a table of each group. So that's kind of a cool feature. The other thing, I don't know if they announced this or we just found it, but I'll showcase it here, is they updated the token thing. And so now you can click on this. It's really cool because before you weren't able to change like where that token was coming from. And now you can. So this feature is cool before, and this works in all editor types where whenever you're inserting dynamic data, there's now this thing. And so you can change it, you can modify it, so you can convert it to uppercase, lowercase. Trimming means if there's any spaces at the beginning or end, then it'll cut those off. And then length will return the number of characters in there. And so you can copy it as well. So that's another feature that, yeah. Did you see a post or any mention of that?
I didn't see any mention. I just pointed it out in the comments of that
Yeah.
thread because that's when I in their screenshots, I think I noticed the down arrow and I was like, I don't remember down arrows being there. And then I looked and editing tokens is just really, really useful, especially for the grid of records type thing where you're selecting which columns that you want in there. Yes. Before you'd have to do it all and then I actually want to add this other column, and you'd have to delete the old token and go back and add each one again, and it was kind of cumbersome and annoying. And now it's not cumbersome or annoying, and it, like you said, it works not just in the Google Doc step, it works in all of the steps where you can insert a token in the first place.
Yeah. Andrew in the community mentions was hoping you could modify the date format with the new token editor, but alas, no.
That'd be super useful. Right now, the editing options are basically for text-based values.
Yeah.
There's no like number formatting either. Wanted to chop off the decimal values for a number, you couldn't do that either. So, still would probably be reliant on a formula field or a script to handle your formatting options. But I think that'd be a good feature to add, some simple formatting options for numbers or dates.
Yeah, for sure. So so that's kind of what you would do there. And then, you run it like any other automation. And then what it returns is the URL to the Google Doc. I open this up. To that, you'll see the output, and it should just have a table. Oh, there we go. And so so this one was grouped by, so it generates those groups, and it has the empty section. A couple things I don't like is that it puts this at the bottom of each table.
Mm-hmm. And that's not something you can turn off, which is odd.
Yeah. It also always inserts a link back, I believe, to the record. So those are a couple things that are kind of annoying. There's lacking formatting. Things like this obviously are not ideal. So so room for improvement, but for the basics of just generating text into a Google Doc, it definitely is a quick win. So it comes in handy. Finally, I'll show, I know you and others pointed out ways to, one of the big things it doesn't do by default is saving it as a PDF back into your Airtable. But there's an easy way to do that. So if you just, so I'm saving this back into a new table. So I'm creating a new record, and I believe this is the right format. So you just insert the URL that came from the generated create doc task, and then just put a /export format equals PDF. Does that look right?
Yeah, sure. Something like that.
I'm pretty sure that's it. So I did that. Let's run a test.
Go above the blue. Well, yeah. You want to do a fresh one?
Let's do that one, yeah. It takes a second, I know, I don't think I've ever noticed that. It goes one step at a time. Okay, so here we got, let's see if this worked. It did. There's our PDF. So if you're trying to save that Google Doc back into a PDF, it's as simple as that. So that's a nice little trick. It just requires adding that to the end.
It does also require that whatever folder you told the Google Docs step to create the document in, that has to be a public or shared folder or public folder. Otherwise, Airtable can't go to that URL to convert it into a PDF and then add it. So
Good
just
point.
warning.
Yeah, good point. I forgot to check that. So luckily I used a folder that must be public for that to work. So yeah, very good point. Yeah, it has to be public, the folder that you're saving your Google Docs to. So, all right. So that's very cool. I know a lot of people will find that useful. And there are third parties. Ontair is one, Documents another for more advanced document creation. So if this doesn't cut the bill for what you need, then there are alternatives that you can check out. So that is a nice feature. Okay, moving on to the BuiltOnAir community. The next item I wanted to highlight. So Justin, who's a friend of the show, posted this. I thought this was cool. I think he was just thinking maybe just some late night Airtable dreaming. It says, last night while replying to someone's query on an older forum about how to monitor for deleted records, a solution occurred to me. It wasn't possible at the time of the original discussion. So basically he's talking about how to keep track if a record got deleted, because there isn't any trigger and there's no way. I know I've tried to find ways, and we do have kind of a workaround to get notified when a record gets deleted, but it's not ideal. But what his suggestion is you use a sync table and you check it. And there's an option when you sync a table to keep it on the destination, even if it gets deleted from the source. And so you make sure that you have that setting on. And then what happens is if it gets deleted from the source ID will get removed from the destination, because now there's no longer a source record associated with that. So then you can easily create a view that says if there's no source ID, then that means these records were deleted. So it's a nice trick on how you can keep track of records that got deleted from your source table. And so that's a pretty cool approach. Jan says, genius. We agree. Nice trick. Thank you, Justin, for sharing that. So if anybody's ever wondering or wants to monitor their deleted records, that is the current way, the only really way I know how to do it, because I don't even think Airtable has any kind of view of that, because you can't in the history. I mean, you could look at the archive and reinstall, but that's not ideal.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. This is probably the easiest way that you even can do it, and I don't really know of another way to do it either.
Yeah. So shout out to Justin for that cool tidbit. All right, moving on to the Reddit community. This one I thought was interesting. It says how to use both Notion and Airtable. This person uses Notion for almost all their daily life, but it's becoming cumbersome. And so they're exploring using Airtable in addition to Notion. So I know a lot of people use Notion. It's a very popular tool, especially for documentation. So this I use a lot as well. I'm going to show in the Ontario spotlight how we use Notion with Airtable. So this is an interesting thread. Are you a Notion user, Camille?
No, I keep starting and stopping using Notion/Coda. To me, they're functionally the same. For documenting when I create an app, giving them like a user guide or here's, how to use this product. But I've never actually pulled the trigger because I've never really sat down and learned too much about it. But it seems like a nice product. I just haven't personally used it so much yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say the main difference is Notion, and I think Coda kind of fits in this category as well, although Coda is probably more of a hybrid of the two. But Notion is better at content first, documents, interlinking between documents, and then Airtable's more data first. And so that's where, there's a use case for both. Notion has a database feature, but it's nowhere near as advanced as Airtable. And it does get cumbersome if you're trying to do a lot of database type stuff in Notion. So I think there is a play for using both. Like I said, I'll showcase in a little bit how we use Notion with OntoAir. And so if you're curious, it's something that I'm exploring. I've done some integration work with Notion. We haven't released any product, probably won't anytime soon, but maybe down the road we'll explore some Notion type apps. So yeah, if anybody's interested in Notion, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how you use Notion with Airtable. All right, finally, we'll end with a little bit of humor. I don't know if you saw this. Sergio posted this in the BuiltOnAir community. I saw it on Twitter first, so I'll show the Twitter version. But it's a picture of New York City, and there's a billboard from ClickUp, a competitor to Airtable, that says "Save one day every week." And it has the ClickUp logo. And then down below it, Airtable has their billboard that says, "This is how." And so it's kind of, I don't think this was intentional. Maybe the placement was, but "This is how" is Airtable's slogan that they're using in their new marketing campaign. So I don't think they purposely came up with that to put right there underneath ClickUp, but it's kind of funny that they're kind of throwing some shade at ClickUp. And I think ClickUp even noticed it. I think a C-level executive at ClickUp tweeted it as well and kind of making fun. So a little bit of back and forth between Airtable and ClickUp going on. I thought this was funny.
That is fairly incredible. Also, they have just similar enough a color scheme in their logo where if you didn't know what ClickUp or Airtable was, you might think that's just one ad.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Airtable, cool.
Yeah. You'd be like, ClickUp. I don't know why I need to ClickUp, but maybe if the Airtable one was above it, then you'd be clicking up or something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That might make more sense. So Airtable, you'll start to see. I think somebody, Rebecca in the BuiltOnAir community, said they saw the ad in Texas, and so I think they promoted it during the golf tournament. The U.S. Open is when they started promoting it on air. So you'll start to see Airtable commercials on TV and billboards, apparently, at least in New York. And I think this was, Sergio posted the same picture in the BuiltOnAir community as well. So it's going around. All right, that concludes the round the bases of everything, keeping you up to date on the BuiltOnAir community. Now let's continue on to spotlight on Ontair. It's an all-in-one toolkit to run your business on Airtable, a suite of apps that allow you to do a variety of different things. And today, because of that notion, I wanted to kind of talk about something that if you're an Ontair customer or interested in some of our apps, we'd love to hear from you on ways that we can improve, different new features that you want to see either in our existing apps or future apps that you want us to build. So this is our customer feedback portal. I was evaluating, I looked at some of the off-the-shelf solutions for getting feedback from customers, and I said, I wonder if I could build this with Airtable and Notion. And so I built this. It took a little bit of time, but our content, our help desk, all of our customer support and documentation is built inside of Notion, and then we use a product that converts it to a website so that we can put it on our domain. And so as part of that Notion, we are tracking all of the customer feedback. So this is an example of using Airtable and Notion. So this is kind of a database. So when you click on this, it goes to a page, and then we ask for feedback. So this is somebody that posted, it might have been, this is somebody posting a new feature for Amplify, and we have the ability to upvote this. So when you click on this, it actually goes to an Airtable form. So not as clean as a fully integrated one, but since we're in the Airtable world, I think people are okay filling out an Airtable form. And so you can upvote this, and what happens is this goes into an Airtable base. I then can approve, or if it's spam or something, then I won't approve it. Once I approve it in Airtable, then we have a script that talks to the Notion API and updates the Notion database with this new information, and then it would then show up back on here as an upvote, as a comment. And so it works both with upvoting an existing one, or if you submit a new feature, that goes to a different Airtable form but has the same kind of functionality. So kind of cool way of using Notion. So Notion's really good for this kind of stuff where it'll automatically convert to a website. So we use that for all of our documentation. So we'd love to hear your feedback. Fill out these forms and submit new ideas of things that you want to see in our existing apps or new apps that you'd love for us to build in the future. So check that out. You can find that on Ontair, and in our menu, you can get to our customer feedback section. So interesting way to use both there. All right, Camille, share your screen and we'll talk about some fields.
Okay. Hold on. I actually have to stop sharing because I have done this in a live base, which is a bad idea. Don't be like me, kids. Don't follow in my footsteps. Okay.
It's all right.
Now I'm ready. Okay.
There we go.
So I have a business where I will sometimes, once a blue moon, create an app for people or do some Airtable related something or other. And with that comes, the issue of billing and invoicing and all of that. And similar to Dan, I could have used an out of the box solution, and I decided, nah, I'm just going to build one. And so I built one in Airtable because, of course, I have a fairly long demo that's been split into two parts of sort of going in to what I've done in Airtable. The first part is more just sort of pointing out an issue I ran into and how I got over it. And then the second half is how I actually bill people, or how I will start billing people in the future. And I use Stripe as my payment processor. So in the first part, Just to give you an idea of what how I've set up my base, I have a table for clients, and each client may sign on for one or more contracts where I will be asked to build something or do something. And each contract will have multiple tasks, one or more tasks assigned to it. There's many hidden fields in here that will help me calculate how long I think that task will take. But I have a column for how long I've actually spent doing that task and status. Pretty simple. And then comes the notion of invoicing for a client. And if you're like me, you might run into a couple of different things where if you have more than one active contract with somebody, what if you want to invoice for both of those contracts in the same invoice? Or you could do it another way where you have multiple projects with the same person going on at the same time, but you want each project to get their own invoice. Well, I wanted flexibility, so I set it up where it's not a given necessarily which contract is being billed for. Instead, what I've done is I've billed straight to the client, and each invoice has invoice line items where I could assign the contract to an individual line item. And that's the basic sort of flow. And the problem I had when I was sort of going through and thinking of how would I want to do this, it's very easy if a project is over to say, okay, well, this is how much time I've spent total for the project. Multiply that by whatever your rate is and say invoice the client. But if you have a long ongoing project that's many, many months, you might not want to wait until the very start of the project where you're just billing for what you've estimated for, or the very end of the project, which is the actual amount of time you spent on it. If you want to bill on a monthly or weekly basis, you have to be able to determine how much time have I spent this month, or how much time have I spent since the last time I've invoiced the client. And that was more cumbersome than I thought it was going to be. And I'm going to talk through the several fields that sort of make that work. If I go back to my clients table, you'll see I have this one client in here. They have two different contracts associated with them. And then I have a roll-up field for the record IDs of my contract records from that client that have outstanding balances. This is done with a fairly simple condition applied. There's a field that just gives me the record ID for each contract, and I'm only asking it to give me the record IDs of that record if the amount that hasn't been billed is greater than 0, and then the status of that project is not canceled. And then this is going to be useful when we talk about Stripe, but I have a similar condition applied to the invoice memo field. Lastly, I have another roll-up similar for the condition status is not canceled, and then it's summing up all of the next amount to invoice. Well, what's the next amount to invoice? If I go back to my contracts table, you can notice I have the actual hours and actual project value. So this is a roll-up summing up all of the hours from the task table where I'm logging how many hours I've spent thus far on that task. I have another roll-up that's saying how much have I invoiced and how much have I paid or has been paid so far. And then what the next amount to invoice, which is what the clients table is looking at. It's looking at the status first and saying if it's complete, then I've already been paid, and just zero it out. Otherwise, give me the project value, which is my fee times the amount of hours I've worked, minus the amount that has been invoiced. And what that effectively allows me to do is as a project goes on and I'm adding more hours to a project, and I've billed for some, and then another month goes by and I'm billing more towards that project, it's not allowing me to bill for the same hours twice. That is effectively what's happening. And I could see if I could break my own system, if I try and create a new project on the fly so we could see this work in action, I'm sure something will go wrong. Hopefully that makes sense so far.
Yep.
Test, and then I'll give it some tasks. This is for the new contract. Right. Well, that's annoying.
That's weird.
Okay. WYFA. I would, just search for that record, but again, this is a live base and I don't want to have stuff just out there. Task number 1. This is a test, and let's say I did 6 hours. So now that's in there, and hopefully if I go back to my contracts table, you'll see I have just a random rate applied in here for the purposes of demo. 6 hours for that task I have logged. And then, what's that rate? I haven't invoiced for this this project at all because I just made it. So none has been paid. And so it's simple. I know that the next amount to invoice is $750. If I go back to my client space, I now have in here, based on my conditional roll-up, that one record that has an outstanding balance. It's that $750. The memo is just helpful for me and for my clients to see, the last time you have been billed was June 21st. Or that was the last time I said I started work. There's a table, or not a table, a field in this table that will give me the date where I put in the number 6, which is how my clients know when did I start work for this invoice. And so that's all sort of ready to go, ready to be packaged into my, invoicing system that uses Stripe. I don't know if there's questions from the chat, but that's sort of the thought process that I had going through. And then I could demo it again with another contract in here if you wanted to see 2 different projects being built at the same time.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. No, ACK. Yet another. And I'm just going to do it from here. Actual hours, let's just say 10. So that you could see in here. Give it a moment. So now I should have 16 hours to bill for, and then the sum of these 2 together for amount outstanding. And then going back to my base, you can see I now have 2 record IDs in here, and then this roll up updated as well to give me that value. And then the amount to invoice has changed as well. This is all sort of leading up to getting the right amount of information I need to transition into going into Stripe and looking at the, a sample invoice that Stripe can create. This is another test I had done previously. This is essentially what we're trying to build. So I want to know the quantity, the number of hours, the unit price, which is a fake rate I applied in here, and then multiplying that together, getting all of that in there, And then for the memo, I want to say, what are the dates that I'm billing since, and then what are the two projects that are supposed to be on this invoice. And
Awesome.
that's all of that information is being collected by my system of 1,000 roll-ups, it seems.
Could you show the memo? I'm curious what that roll up looks like.
Yeah, so the roll-up itself is like this. So we've talked about it on the show before that you could have full formulas in a roll-up field. Sometimes it's, finicky, so it's not always the recommended solution, but I wanted to save myself on some fields. So if there's anything to invoice in the first place, then, give you this simple statement, this invoice bills for yada, yada, yada. And then I'm formatting the date of my work date, which is again the earliest date for the task that has hours which have not yet been billed for. It is a complicated sentence, but that's what that is. That's what invoice work date is. And then it's a bullet character that I've added, so it's not a perfectly formatted list if you had hanging lines, but it looks nice for shorter values. And then I'm joining the remaining values with a line break and then another bullet character as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome example of what you can do with the formula section of a join or a roll up.
So I had a lot of roll-ups in this portion of the demo. That's the only one that's particularly special. All of the other ones are very simple. They just happen to have, a condition applied to them.
Yeah. Awesome. Very cool stuff. Let me do a transition here. So that was the formulas and all the linked records and roll-ups. So lots of advanced uses of formulas. And now we're going to create an automated invoice. So let's move on to the automate create section and how you're doing that. Back to you.
Is my screen up?
Yep.
Okay. So I did this in Make. I know Scott was in the chat. He's our resident Make/Integromat expert. But I did this actually for another client and then said, I should steal that. And so I've adopted a similar sort of workflow. And I'm going to explain it first before I show it running, because again, this is a live base. And if I've messed something up, I want to make sure that you know what it's supposed to do. And what it's supposed to do is run off a webhook. So there is a automation in here that's fairly simple. I have a single select field that when I change it to create and send invoice, it is supposed to do one of two things. I have a condition applied for making sure that there's, the number is greater than 0. I don't want to invoice a client for $0. Make sure that there's actually that roll up that had the list of record IDs. Make sure that's not empty. It has to associate it with a contract, and make sure that they already have a customer ID in Stripe. So in Stripe, which is my preferred payment processor, each customer has their own unique ID. And if they don't have one, that means they're not a record in Stripe yet, which means this automation is going to fail because it's not going to be able to send anything to anyone. So making sure all of that is in there. If so, run a script. The script is very simple. All it's doing is posting the record ID of the of what I want to bill for to Make, and then from there, I'm updating that same record again and saying that the invoice has been sent. Otherwise, if none of those conditions happen, then I'm changing that same single select into something that looks like an error, so I know that this person was never invoiced, which is just a tip that I think is good practice. If something fails, show it somewhere.
Yeah.
So back into Make, what's happening is the webhook is received, and then it's getting the record from that record ID. So again, I'm triggering off of the client, not the contract. all of this information, top level is in client, so it's getting the client record. Once again, making sure that I have contracts to bill for, and because I set it up so that one client can have multiple contracts that they're being billed for, I have an iterator that's setting up or splitting up rather which contracts that they have that have outstanding balances. So it's taking this array, and if there's more than one value, it's splitting that apart. So it's getting the contract for each record ID I have in there. In this example, I have 2. And then it's creating a invoice item in Stripe. So in Stripe, you can have one invoice, and each invoice can have multiple line items. This is creating those line items. It is fairly straightforward. I'm doing it by unit amount and quantity. Something to note if you're working in Stripe is they require that the numbers you give them are in cents and not whole dollars. So there's formulas in my base that I'll have a regular number or currency field that gives the amount times 100, and then a formula field is taking that amount and dividing it by 100. The reason why I did it that way and not the other way around is because I want my automations to fill in values, and the values that Stripe is going to, spit out are going to be in cents, which means I have to use a formula to convert it. If I did it the other way around, I wouldn't be able to get information from Stripe in here. So anyway, that's pretty simple. For description, I'm just tacking on the words per hour at the end because that's how I bill. And then I am creating, that same information back into my Airtable in my invoice line items table, like so. It just helps me keep track of the amount, just making sure that I know, oh yeah, on this date, this contract was billed for, because again, I'm splitting things up that way. And then I'm aggregating everything back together. And then finally creating the actual invoice itself. So what Stripe does by default is it will create an invoice with all of the uninvoiced line items. So you could create 50 line items and then never create an invoice, and those will just sit pending in Stripe's system. And then the next time you create an invoice, you don't even really have to tell it which line items. It will just look at all of the pending line items it has and attach that to the next invoice. So you can see I'm not really telling it, here are the line items that I want you to include. It just knows because those are the ones that haven't been touched yet. Auto advance, for your reference, is if you want to automatically build or bill that client if they have a payment already on file, like if they've already paid you with credit card or their bank or whatever. You can tell Stripe to say just bill them automatically if they already have something on file. And then for description, that's where I'm putting in that memo field that had things as a bulleted list. From there, it is finalizing the invoice, which when you create an invoice in Stripe, it'll start off as draft and won't actually go anywhere until you finalize it. So that's what this is. Very simple. It's just sort of stamping it ready, and that's when it'll be sent. And then last but not least, it is creating an invoice record in Airtable itself with all of this information. So Stripe will give you a name for each invoice. Every client in Stripe will have their own prefix and then a number attached to them. That's what the number looks like. Then the unique invoice ID, which would be in like the URL, invoice date, all that kind of stuff. I'm hooking it back to the client that started this automation in the first place. And then I am getting all of the invoice line item Airtable records that I had made previously and attaching them to this invoice record. And then what's nice about Stripe is that it gives you URL that your customers can click on and pay through like an online portal. And it'll also give your invoice as a PDF, which is what I showed earlier. And I'm just hooking that straight into the Airtable record. And that is what the process is. And now I'm going to see if it works.
Big test.
So I hit run, and now what I do is I go back into this base and change the single select into create and send invoice. So if I do that, my Airtable automation should fire. And when it does, this webhook should get a response.
There it goes.
Is it going? Is it going? Yay, it worked.
Working.
Or did it? So you kind of saw it flash really, really quickly, but all of these are now empty, and my amount to invoice is now 0. And I'm going to walk through what happened just now on the Airtable side.
So much magic.
You'll see I have a second invoice in my invoices tab. The second part of my Airtable automation that changed this back to sent is there. Actually, that's not from the Airtable automation. I think I did that here. Oh, no, I didn't. It is from my Airtable automation that's changing this value to sent. But I have a second invoices record, and that's great. If I go to my contracts table, it was these last two. I have my project value, which is the same, but now my amount invoiced is no longer 0. It's the amount from my actual project value, because I created an invoice attaching those items to it. And then amount paid is 0 because I haven't paid for anything yet. If I go to my invoices tab, that invoice record is there now with the amount I've invoiced. Nothing has been paid, yada, yada. But I should be able to click this button. Yes. So my memo came in here. I have my 2 contracts as line items. That's all nice. Then if I go back here and go to my invoice line items, this is grouped by client, so you can see it's these second 2, the amount invoiced and the amount invoice paid. So another roll-up that I didn't show is I'm pulling from the invoice record itself how much that whole invoice has been paid, and then I'm clamping the amount that the item has been paid based on it can't be more than what this line item is. So, and it I've confused myself. So so when you've set it up like I have, I don't want to track payments by invoice line item because that's finicky and annoying. I want to just how much have they paid towards the whole invoice. So I've pulled in the whole invoice and said it's either the amount of this line item itself or it's the total amount. And that's how you end up with making sure that this value is never more than the actual line item itself. If I were to go back and change this to, hold on, which one is a newer project? This one's a new project. This was 6 hours. If I change it to 16, hopefully I should be able to go back in here and say, yeah, my actual project value for this contract is now $2,000. The amount I've invoiced is $750. The next amount to invoice is now $1,250. And that's how I keep my business sort of going and honest. So I'm only billing for that extra 10 hours that I just did, and not the previous 6 hours that was already on an invoice. Once they pay that, that's great, but I'm not going to invoice them twice, even though they haven't paid for it yet. Right. So that's just simple math, just subtracting the total amount that I can bill for minus how much I have already billed for, not paying attention to how much has been paid.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yet another example of an amazing mini app product that you can build inside of Airtable with a little bit of help from make.com.
Yeah, and it was, there's some gotchas, learning how to do this with Make, but once you're sort of got it in there, it's fairly simple, and the connector for Stripe is, pretty nice. You could do most of what you would want to do fairly easily, and like I said, I like Stripe. It allows me to create nice, clean PDFs and have online payment portals with like nothing. And there's a cost associated with using Stripe, not for Make if you're on such a small scale like myself, but for using Stripe, there's a certain percentage they take of each transaction. I think it's worth it because you could do a system like this, which while a little finicky and has a lot of moving parts to it, it gets the job done, and it's custom to the way I would like to, run my system.
Right. And when you generate the invoice, does Stripe send an email, or would you then set up another automation to send the PDF?
If this were a real, this is all using test data. Stripe has a really nice test mode, so I'm not actually charging myself the thousands of dollars that I've racked up over the course of this demo. If this wasn't a test, it would send them an actual email.
Gotcha.
So they would get an email with that link to it and this PDF attached to the email as well. And I mentioned earlier that you could elect to auto charge existing customers. They still get an email. They just, are charged with whatever's on file.
Yeah. Awesome. Well done, Camille. You've showcased the power of Airtable very nicely. All right. We will conclude. I'm just going to do a quick demo. Before that, join our community. We'd love to have you if you're not already in there, builtonair.com/join. And there are thousands of other Airtable users in there, and we'd love to have you join with us. So in conclusion, I'm going to do just a quick demo of an app that's in the App Store. I'm not affiliated with this app, but I've been thinking a lot about barcodes because I don't use barcodes or QR codes. I actually haven't done any client projects that required it. So I'm obviously familiar with them or know what they are, but I haven't actually done a whole lot of work with the barcode field. But so I thought this would be interesting because I'm actually starting to get familiar with it. And so basically this barcode generator from Little Apps is the publisher of it, or Tiny Apps, Little Apps. You just install this from the marketplace. They do have a free tier that allows you to run one at a time, or you can upgrade and get a license that allows you to do bulk updates. But basically, you'll have to set this up a bit. Every field is required, so you are required to select a view, and then what you're doing is you're converting a text field into a barcode. So usually you're going to have a number, like a serial number or something with a product, and then you want to convert that to a barcode. I'm just converting the value of the name of these projects, and then you're going to set up an attachment field. So not a barcode field. This is an attachment field because it's actually going to generate an image and save it to the attachment field. And then it does also require another text field for any errors that might be generated, which I did create an error. And then once you have that all set up, there's also some barcode options. So there's different types of barcodes that you could set up. They have another app for QR codes. So I don't know if QR codes are supported in this one or if it's just barcodes. I had no idea. There's so many different barcode formats, but apparently there are. And so you can choose the format that you need. And you can, if you upgrade, there's more customizing you can do with the colors and things like that. But once you have it set up, then any record that you're selected on, you just can do this one at a time with the free version. And here it generated an error basically saying that this text was too long. So usually you're doing like a serial number. So apparently there's a text limit. These ones that are shorter worked. So you see here it generated the barcode. And so this barcode somehow represents this text value of the name. So you could then use this for barcode scanners. And then if you use the app, I believe you can scan a code and it will convert that into the text value of that code and save it into a barcode field. So that's useful if I know some industries rely heavily on barcodes and QR codes. So nice to know that there's ways that you can automate this and set it up. So check out Barcode Generator in the marketplace, along with all the other apps that are in the marketplace that help you expand your Airtable usage. And with that, we'll conclude our episode. Thank you, Camille, for your amazing demo of what you've built. And thank you all for joining live. If you have something interesting and you want to showcase it on a future episode, reach out. We'd love to see what you've built on there. Take care, everyone.